Peter, thank you for joining us first off.
My pleasure.
And also thank you for your contributions to our website, which is pretty cool. That all your articles so far have been very well received, and it's right up our alley, the alley of trying to just raise consciousness, get people to think more critically. So thank you for your contributions.
My pleasure to do it. Yeah.
So the first question I kind of have is, through your work, you often talk about the importance of being present.
Yes.
And how do you feel that presence can change the way an individual can live their life?
Well, first we'll talk about what we mean by being present. In some sense, we're always present. I mean, all we ever know is here and now. But what I mean when we're not present, I mean we are caught in our thoughts, our story about the past, our story about the future, what might happen, might not happen. And so being present is about really stepping out of our thinking mind and coming back to the actual experience in the moment. And when we're caught in the thinking mind, is that when our attention is absorbed in some story we're telling ourselves, something we're worrying about, something we're hoping for, whatever, we actually lose contact with this primary reality. And we also lose contact with what's going on in our cells and our feelings and our body. So we're distracted when we're caught in our thoughts. And most of that stuff is stuff we just create in our minds. It's all just happening in imagined reality. And a lot of it's based on fear, concern, worry, which leads us to have physiology to become tense, worried. In fact, almost any time we're caught up in some thinking, we're not in the present, there's some tension in the mind. The mind becomes slightly tense, consciousness becomes slightly constricted, we're not completely at ease. And so coming back to the present, one of the things we're doing is coming back to a state of ease. When thinking stops or you pause it, there's a sense of relief, and it's like, yes, here I am. And a sort of deep sense of okayness in a way, that things are okay. It's our thinking and worrying that makes us think things aren't okay. And there's times when we do need to think and worry. It's not that all thinking and worrying is wrong. There's times when we need to do that, when we need to plan and work things out. But most of the time we don't need to. So coming back to the present is coming back to that here and now, coming back to that ease. But it's also stepping out of the ego mind, because when I say ego mind, I'm really talking about an egoic way of thinking. If I look at myself, I don't find a thing called the ego. All I notice when I look inside is there's this thing called I, me, which is always here, always present, observing what is happening. And most of the time I don't notice it because I'm caught up in the stories, etc. But in that story, we create an imagined self. There's Peter Russell with his stuff and his ambitions and his concerns, and it's like there's a character in the story. It's like when you're reading a novel, a good novel. There's the hero of the novel, and the hero's got his personality, he's got his stuff, his past, and his trials and tribulations and all of that stuff, and we get totally absorbed in the novel, and we get all excited or worried about what's going to happen, or the same in a good movie, and we forget we're the one who's actually reading the book or watching the movie. We get totally caught up in the story that's going on. And it's the same in life. We get caught up in our own personal story with our own personal hero, which is us, and overlook the real self, the true self, which is just that sense of I-ness, beingness, which is experiencing this moment right now. And so coming back to the present, we're also coming back to our true self. And, spiritual teachings talk about the true self and makes it sound like it's some sort of way thing out there that, when you discover the true self, it's going to be like some amazing experience. It's not. It's just recognizing what is always there, what is always present. But we overlook, we don't notice, because what we're noticing is all the stuff that's going on around us or in our heads.
It's true. Most people go their entire lives without ever taking that moment to actually just calm down. And it's powerful when you do. So do you feel that, because I know you've come up with quite a few meditation resources yourself, do you feel that meditation is one of the best tools to help you kind of step into that presence? Or do you feel that there's other ways that are quicker, or can anything be done really to help realize that?
I'm just sort of hesitating over the word meditation, because there's so many different types of meditation. And when I talk about meditation, it's not really about having a particular technique or thing you do or complex process. It's more what we're just talking about. It's more that pausing the thinking, stepping back into the present moment. And it's a very simple thing to do, but the practice is more learning how to do that, even in situations where we're really caught up, is learning how to just pause, breathe, come back to the moment. And so a sort of meditation practice where you're sitting down for 15, 20 minutes, say, or whatever, and the simplest meditation practice is just noticing whenever you're caught up in thinking, just noticing that, not blaming yourself or feeling you've gone wrong or you're no good because you're caught up in the monkey mind. That happens. It's like when you notice you've been caught up in monkey mind, it's like saying, okay, and where's the present? And coming back to, I think the easiest thing is coming back to the body, because that's always in the present. The sensation of breathing, sensations in the body, you just come back, here I am. And then you're off again and just coming back. And we do that as a practice for two reasons, well, many reasons, but one is during the practice we're coming back to just being at ease, which is good, and so we take some of that quietness back into life. But also we're training ourselves so that when we're in the midst of life, we're stuck in a traffic jam or something, instead of getting caught up in the whole story, we can just pause, here I am. So it's really about taking that into life. And we could call that meditation, but it's really just pausing and just coming back to self, coming back to being, coming back to that sense of presence that's always there.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have that resource, just to remember that in points, because obviously the times when you need it the most are the points where you would never have the opportunity to go sit somewhere and take 10 minutes to meditate on your own. So.
Exactly. And the times when you need it the most are often the times when you forget about it.
Exactly.
But that's part of the process. It's like, it's beginning to realize when you get that glimmer, it's like, there I go, caught up. It's like, okay, I know how to just come back to this. And it becomes easier to do it in more and more difficult situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the next question I have, so obviously one of the main purposes behind this specific event is to merge the world of consciousness and the world of science. Mm-hmm. And why do you feel personally that mainstream science seems to be so hesitant to give consciousness any daylight, per se, or to kind of incorporate or at least work with it?
I think there's several reasons. One is purely historical, that when science began to develop, about 250, 300 years ago, with people like Descartes, they called themselves, they weren't even called scientists, he called himself a natural philosopher. We are philosophers who study nature. And because people were getting burnt at the stake then by the Catholic Church if you did anything that questioned the spiritual truth, he said, we'll leave all the truths about the mind, spirituality, that's the church, we'll leave that to you. We're just going to study natural phenomena in the world. And so science sort of started out by saying, we're not going to study consciousness. I think that was the sort of beginning of it. Mm-hmm. But then science is also concerned with being objective, with having testable facts and even putting numbers to it to measure it. And you can't do that with consciousness. I mean, we're talking about our own subjective experience. And you can't weigh that, you can't put a ruler against it, you can't measure it in the normal way. So we can't get the sort of data about consciousness that science likes to play with. Yeah. And so the very fact that we are conscious is something we all know, and it's like, but science can't actually deal with that. Its focus is on the external world rather than the internal world, just practicality. But also I think another reason is that the current scientific worldview seems to work perfectly well without needing to understand consciousness. We can understand how atoms work, how stars evolve, how DNA works. All of this stuff, we can understand that without needing to bring in this troublesome thing of consciousness. And so why bother with consciousness? Yeah. I think that's another reason. And yet, I think this is the irony of it, is the test of any scientific theory, any scientific worldview is, does it predict things correctly? And so, if you have to come up with a new theory, you say, let's test it. What does it predict the world will be like? And here we have this whole worldview that says that the reality is matter, energy, space and time. That's the basic worldview. And the one thing that does not predict is that any of us should be aware. It may predict how we should function biologically and all this stuff. And so according to the current scientific worldview, we should be going around doing our things, walking, talking, eating, making love, getting angry or upset, but not have any internal experience of it. We should just be biological robots. And so there's clearly something that's missing from the current scientific worldview. Because the one thing we all know for sure is that we are conscious. I mean, right now we could all be sitting in the Matrix, and this may be just, virtual reality, but we would still be conscious of the virtual reality. We would still be experiencing. So it's the one thing we know for certain is that we are conscious, and it's the one thing that science cannot account for. And right there we have one huge anomaly just staring us in the face. And we don't know what to do with it. And so what science is doing the whole time is trying to say, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's quantum phenomena, maybe it's organisation in the brain, maybe it's chemistry, maybe it's that. They're all looking to somehow see how the current scientific model, the matter, energy, space-time model, could possibly account for the creation of consciousness. But ultimately, I don't think it ever will. I think we need to expand the model to include consciousness as something that's as fundamental to the universe as matter, energy, space and time. Or actually, I would go further and say more fundamental than matter, energy, space and time.
That's a beautiful way of putting it, and I agree with you completely. Now, in a panel discussion yesterday that you were moderating, people were delving into like that moment that sparked their change or made them start to care. A lot of people were referring to it in that way. Do you happen to recall the moment that really kind of dug you into this rabbit hole of seeing things this way or led you down this path?
Yes, what came up for me yesterday was not so much to do with consciousness, but to do with the world, humanity's effect on the world, the environment. And it was when I was about 12 years old, I was in France, and I was taken with the people I was staying with to this place in a forest, which was like a tourist attraction, because in the middle of this forest, there was this area of about 2 or 3 acres, which was desert. Like sand dunes, pure sand, and they had camels there. You could ride on the camels. It was like a tourist attraction, and so people went there, to be in the desert, in the middle of the forest. But what struck me was the person who took me there explained what had happened. That this forest, sometime in the past, people had cut the trees down in this forest, in this area, for some reason. They needed the wood or something, but they cut the trees down, and without the trees, the soil disintegrated. And the whole thing turned to desert, and it had been like that for a long time. And just realizing, if we start cutting the trees down, we go back to desert. It was just this realization of the whole of life is this integrated system. And you don't cut the tree down just left with soil ready for replanting; it disintegrates. And then, just a little later, sort of looking at a map of the earth and seeing this whole yellow region across the Sahara, and realizing, that's what we've done a long time ago to that whole belt of northern Africa all the way through. It's like there's evidence that was, all forest covered at one time. It's like, wow, this is what we're doing. This is what we can do to the planet if we're really not careful, if we start interrupting that natural integration of everything. And so that was something that was a real awakening for me in terms of humanity and our relationship with the planet.
That even goes on the other side of it. That could be very motivating in the sense of people that feel that any action that they may take as an individual may have no impact, when the reality is enough people doing it and it can have a drastic impact that they may not see immediately, but eventually could turn into that desert. It's incredible.
Well, I'm sure if we take, the Sahara or, right across to Egypt or even the Middle East, Babylon, Iraq, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, it was a great verdant area with all these beautiful plants and things. And it's just, one by one, we took the trees down, built a hut out of it. Wood was the basic technology. It was what you built things out of. You made tools out of it. You built your houses out of it. You burned it for fire to create energy. And just, one by one, we took the trees down. And gradually the whole thing just fell apart.
Just have one final question for you. A driving force behind like our website at Collective Evolution is to inspire people to kind of think outside the box. So if there was one thing you could tell our community, or any community really, to inspire them to think more critically or to be open to more content such as what they offer at this type of seminar, this type of conference, what would it be that you would love to share with them or get them to kind of look into it?
I think the fact that deep down we all share the same consciousness, in the sense that we are, what happens on the surface, the stories, our needs, our background, all that's very different. But deep down, each of us has that potential to be at peace, and we lose it, and we get caught up in stuff. But what we're all looking for ultimately is to return to that state of peace. Whether you talk about as wanting to be happy, whatever, there's many ways of talking about it, but we all want to come back to a state, most generic way of saying of feeling okay. We all want to come back to a state of feeling okay. And if that is true, then how do we interact with other people in such a way that our intention is that whatever I do or say, the intention is the other person should feel okay as a result of my expression, whatever it is. Because too easily what can happen is I get slightly upset, you say something, I get slightly upset by it, maybe no reason whatsoever from your point of view, but then I come back with something that's slightly attacking to you, you feel slightly upset, this time quite justifiably, and we get into this thing where two people, both of whom are looking to basically be happy, to be loved, to be respected, are sort of digging at each other in the sense that if I just upset you a little bit, you'll realise the error of your ways and be nice to me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to teach you a lesson so that you're nice to me and love me better. Yeah. And it's stupid, it happens the whole time, but the solution is so simple. It's just to continually monitor ourselves and make sure that whatever we say or do, there's not an element of attack. And when we notice there's some slight element of attack there, just to say, just to pause. I think the Buddha said, one of his definitions of right speech was, if you cannot say something in such a way that the other person feels good upon hearing it, it's better to retain noble silence until you've worked out how to say it. It's not like, I don't know how to say shut up, but it's like, okay, I don't quite say it, let me pause and let me think about how can I say this so that you feel loved and respected. Even if it's something critical, some critical feedback, how can I do that in a way that you feel supported rather than threatened?
That's great. That's even something that we realize through our work on C is and what kind of sets us apart from some of the other websites they're doing is that we make a conscious effort to be neutral in the approach we're taking it. We're not trying to get people riled up or angry as other websites might be going after, and people appreciate that. They find themselves more naturally receptive to it. So that's wonderful. You touched upon it. Thank you so much for this, Peter. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, you too. So.
Birthdays are only applicable to the body-mind, which is in time, not to the spirit, which is not in time. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deepak. Really appreciate it.
Can we get some pictures?